But I would like to acknowledge that I am speaking to you from unceded land of the Lenape people, and that Jerry is coming to you from the unceded land of the Mohican people, and that this Zoom application is coming to you from the unceded land of the Timaean peoples. So I'd like us all to take a breath together and offer acknowledgement and deep gratitude to these people and this land, because we would not be here today without the genocide and systemic exclusion of Indigenous peoples. So let's all take a moment to offer our gratitude and acknowledgement. Thank you. So this acknowledgement is just a first step towards a lifelong fight to dismantle the legacy of settler colonialism and white supremacy. So thank you for joining us in that tonight.
Thank you, Anna, for leading that.
Thank you.
And thank you all for being here. This is really very exciting. This is an experiment that we hope will be enjoyable, enlightening, expanding, encountering. And before we kind of get into the meat of the evening, I just want to say a couple things about Zoom, what we're doing. So first of all, we're recording this for archival purposes. If for any reason you don't want your image recorded, you can turn off your video. That's totally cool. So worry not if that's an issue. Your video can be on or off, that's up to you. I would ask that during the talks to keep yourself muted, and during the discussion afterwards to keep yourself muted unless you're talking, just because background noise ends up canceling out and drawing focus. And also the chat. I would say feel free to, I think especially when we have open discussion at the end of today, feel free to be active in the chat. I think I'm interested in what happens when we have these sort of parallel conversations going on. So I'm going to pass it back over to Anna.
Yes, thank you. So today we're going to participate in two talks, two talk flocks. We are going to have a 20-minute talk by George Emilio Sanchez and a 20-minute talk by Elena Rose Light. After both talks, we'll have a discussion with the entire group. You're welcome to leave early, take a break, or whatever feels best for you. We are open to everything.
What is the meaning of flock talk? What an excellent, excellent question. So what are we doing here? The idea of this came from, I was reading this wonderful book called The Grand Piano, which is a collective autobiography of a group of experimental poets from San Francisco in the 70s. And while I was reading it one morning, something caught me that one of them hosted a series of talks in his living room, and that this ended up being a very interesting thing for the whole group and involved in kind of the group's formation. And that thought just felt very interesting to me. And when I talked about it to Anna, Anna also found it very interesting. And what we're interested in doing this is exploring what talks are, exploring what a digital talk is, given that this is a way that people ourselves are gathering right now, saying like, what is that? What is it to meet online in this kind of space? And what's possible in this kind of space? And I think with that also to have a kind of horizontal mentality, that what's very nice about something like this is that we don't need a lot of stuff to do it. And I think we don't need a lot of expertise to give a talk. And so feeling that, embodying that, and also enjoying the juxtaposition and encounter of ideas and of people who maybe don't know each other, whose fields and interests come from very different places. And I find right now, a lot of what I'm interested in is the fact that doing this can have the warmth of togetherness, ideally, and the urgency of news. And I'm interested in the juxtaposition of the political and the aesthetic and the academic and the philosophical and the banal. All of these things kind of bumping into each other in talk feels very interesting. As we also will be doing this every 2 weeks or so, until it no longer is interesting. And I think what we're very interested in that is how we would love for you to come back. And we'd love for this to become a little group that gets to know each other a little bit more and more in these little fragmented conversations. So thank you for joining us in the Talk Flock. Anna?
Yeah, and just to plug that our next Talk Flock will be on June 24th, which is a revision from what we put in the email this morning. And that will be going out to you guys after this. We really hope that you guys will all be there. Also, in lieu of like tickets or pricing of that nature, we would love for you guys to donate to some of the following organizations that I'm going to put in the chat. I just picked 3, though there are a myriad of options, but if you want some direction, that is that for you. Also this week, there's a really important budget being finalized in New York. And this is a really exciting and important time where we can agitate to change the budget for what we would prefer. So we are okay, I'm sorry, I'm being inarticulate. But the amount that's allocated to the NYPD on the budget currently is so large, it could pay the rent of all the New Yorkers' rents earning less than $61,000 for 5 months. It could match all of the COVID-19 federal aid for all undocumented, excluded New Yorkers in mixed status households. It could finance 130,000 new units of affordable housing. It could expand the city's emergency food assistance program by 24 times its current budget, feeding 228 million meals for hungry New Yorkers. And there's just so many things that this money could be better suited for. So I'm going to put another link in here that gives you more information about this budget and some resources and how you can contact your representatives and council members to ask them to defund the NYPD. Thank you. Right, because funding these programs is much more important to our public health and safety. So if you're willing, please check out those links. Thank you.
And I would say if you're not in New York, I would encourage you to look into whatever organized efforts there are to change the funding structures wherever you live. So with all of that, it is a great pleasure to introduce to you George, who is going to speak in a little bit. And I met George in, I think, January at MacDowell, which is an artist residency in New Hampshire, where some of you I also met. And George, kind of as soon as he showed up, I thought he was very cool. And he seemed very mysterious. You know, a lot of people were there for long periods. George was there for a week, and you could tell he just like dug into his work like a badger. And it was amazing kind of seeing him do that and sort of watching him from afar. And then finally, when I did get to actually meet him, realizing what an incredibly warm and bright person he is. And when he shared some of his work with us, I'll speak for myself in saying that I was totally blown away by what he does. So George is a writer and a performer and an activist. And at least in my experience of his work really blurs the line between personal narrative, political narrative. It's sometimes hard to tell when he's just talking and when he's performing. And that to me speaks to a politics that is deeply embedded, that is deeply lived, that is deeply thought. And so it's an absolute pleasure to get to hear from him tonight. Please join me in welcoming George Emilio Sanchez.
Wow. Well, Jerry, no one's ever compared me to a badger before, so it's kind of great. Okay, so I'd like to just begin. It's so great that Jerry's doing this, and you know, we actually had a discussion earlier in the week to say, should we pause and not do it this week because of all that's happening? And I said, no, that's the reason we have to do it. And then I just went into a nosedive. So I'm coming out, and I want to thank Jerry and Anna for doing this because it really helps me to have this moment. It's great you're all here. Can we just take a moment because I want to do something quick for George Floyd, for Ahmaud Arbery, for Tony McDade and Breonna Taylor. We could just take a moment and just be in silence for just a moment, please. Okay, thank you. I got a thing, and I don't know how many people, I'm in New York City and Brooklyn. I don't know how many people got it, but it's slow, but it started 2 nights ago that we're starting this thing at 8 o'clock. We stand on our stoops or on the street and silent for 9 minutes to honor George Floyd. And that just started a couple nights ago. So I'm just sharing that with you. I don't know, maybe I'll send it to you, Jerry. You can send it out, okay? James Baldwin said, "The purpose of art is to reveal the questions hidden by the answers." I'll say it one more time. The purpose of art is to reveal the questions hidden by the answers. And for me, and in this moment right now, that quote really resonates because what I see is the clash between asking questions and dealing with answers. So this is something that has really helped me, you know, in my work. Jerry's being far too kind. I feel totally unprepared and very naked, but this has been a real difficult week for so many reasons. And we were speaking beforehand. It's like, it's just really challenging and difficult. The trauma alone, let alone what do we do? And for me personally in New York City, it's been very hard because I have not, it's the first time in my life I have not participated in public protest because of COVID and the pandemic and because of my age. And I just want to be, I'm healthy. I don't have anything. Well, I have a heart, but I don't, you know, I'm okay, but I'm nervous about that. So it's been challenging, and I'm looking for other ways to support, to be in solidarity. But it's a challenging moment to be in the epicenter of the pandemic where we were hit very hard. The hospital 10 blocks away, you know, had 2 trailers, not 1, 2 trailers outside, and that hospital got hit very hard. So these last 3 months have just been hell. Simultaneously, real quick, just to give you some sense what Jerry was talking about, I'm working on a new piece, and it is related. So I'm not trying to digress or get away from it. It's really related to everything that's happening. I'm doing a piece that's called In the Court of the Conqueror. It's the second part of a trilogy that I'm doing called Performing the Constitution. And the next piece is about the 200-year-old history, almost 200-year-old history, of Supreme Court decisions that have really diluted tribal sovereignty in Indian country. And when I say Indian country, people say, wait a second, George, you're not supposed to say that. It's Native American. All my Indian friends who are artists and scholars identify as Indians and Native Americans. But because there's a thing called federal Indian policy, and there's many reasons why Indian is not derogatory and not dismissive, but actually speaks to people's experience. In my effort to put this together, have been doing a lot of research and reading, and I read a book by a professor at Oklahoma University called Conquest by Law. And it deals with the first really big historic case around the US Republic, its formation, and its relationship to all the different Indian nations. And that case is called Johnson versus McIntosh from 1823. I read this book, I emailed this professor. I have learned that if you email law professors or law scholars, they answer you within 30 minutes. They're very lonely people. So like these people just call me back right away. Yo, you read my book? So I asked this guy if I could interview him. I interviewed him, it was great. And then he says to me at the end, you know, George, you should probably check out this program we have. We have a master's in legal study for indigenous people's law. It's online, it's asynchronous, it's made for people who have lives and careers like you. And I think you'd really like it. So I looked into it, I applied, I got accepted. I'm in my 4th week of a master's in legal studies of indigenous people law. And I only did it because I really wanted to like merge performance art and method acting. I thought this is my moment, you know, who does this? And so, so in my research and in doing this, and Jerry, you better give me a time limit because I'll get lost. Give me a warning when I have to end. It's a real traumatic thing for me to do this because it deals with my own background, which is what Jerry was referring to when I was in McDowell. I started to really write the piece out. And what I found was with all the research, paralleling my research was my own investigation about my own past and really starting to deal with all the trauma of my upbringing of an Ecuadorian immigrant family. My parents came from Ecuador. And I'm the darkest person in my family. And I even talked to my brother and said, you know, when mom got pissed at you, did she call you Indio de mierda? You know, we just found out 2 weeks ago, you know, and Indio de mierda is what my mother used to say to me when she got pissed. And that means India made a shit. And he said, no, she never called me that, you know? So that kind of just confirmed something. And so my upbringing and my connection to all this is my own Indian identity and how it's been really suppressed and really sort of like, you know, strangled out of me. And then starting to come back to understand there's a legitimate reason why I have these feelings. And then what I'm finding out, and it's really, I find out in an academic setting, the history, which is really, really unbelievable how skewed it is. And yet the way we were taught that, or we weren't taught, you know, how these things came to be. And in essence, I can wrap it up in one sentence. In the Johnson versus McIntosh case, it basically says, I mean, it's pages and pages, and there's been so much written about it. It's very complex. But what it comes down to is the discovering sovereign, meaning the Europeans, because they discovered whoever's there, they now own title to the land. So the land is theirs, and anybody who was there is an occupant. And so it's a legal term. So when we say discovery, it's not just some sort of adjective. It has legal binding. It means that Indians cannot own their land. And that's what began a process of, that's what colonialism looked like, and that's what colonization was. And when you read about the case, which is what I've been doing now for weeks, it's just mind-boggling because the case really was originally about a land sale and nothing but. Was the land sale between a white man from an Indian legal or not? And they found that it wasn't. And then the judge just went nuts and said, but let me just assert, you don't have to buy the land because it's ours. It's ours by discovery. So I'm not making this up. You can look it up, Johnson versus McIntosh. So in doing this, I wrote something while I was doing this. It's really short, and I don't know what's going to happen with it, but it was a moment that came unplanned. I've been reading all this stuff and researching it, and so it just, I don't know where this is going to go. Bear with me, okay? But this is it. It's about a few minutes, okay? What if I said to you, the Indian Wars were illegal? What would you say? You know about the Indian Wars, right? Okay, let's just say, imagine there's no country. And let's say, for example, between 1850 and 1890, pre and post Civil War, how many armed conflicts, skirmishes, battles were there between Indians and, what do we say, non-Indians? Okay, between Indians and whites. Okay, between Indians and white men. What would you say if I quoted you over 40 wars that resulted in approximately, according to the Encyclopedia of Indian Wars, this is real, by Gregory F. Michno, it exists, that at least there were 1,500 battles, at least, at minimum, in 19 different states, 19 states, killing, I don't know, I don't know, killing a lot of Indians. That we know. Now, you're asking me why? Why am I asking you this? Did you know about the wars? Or you didn't know about the wars? Okay, let's just say I take you at your word. Let's say I believe you. I believe you when you say you don't know. But my question is this: what if I told you the Indian wars were illegal? What would you say? Would you take me at my word? Let's say you don't know. Let's say that you've never thought about this, that you never considered such a thing, that Indians might have been killed illegally. What? And that's what I'm saying. The Indian wars were, in fact, by definition, by law, by the Constitution, the 40 wars, the 1,500 battles were all illegal. And if you don't know, and I take you at your word that you don't know, would you take me at my word? Because I give you my word, my honor, my history, my purpose, my people, my word, that Indians were killed illegally. You really don't know that? Are you just saying that? Are you saying you don't know because why? Because you don't want me to get upset? Maybe? You don't believe me? Well, how could you believe me? I mean, that's such a crazy idea, right? That cowboys and the cavalry and the US Army and the US killed Indians. Well, we know we killed them, but it was illegal. But you didn't know that. But look, I'm just throwing it into the mix. I'm throwing this into your head. I'm throwing this into your mindset, into your belief system. Your implicit bias that the US, the cowboys and the cavalry together and separately in a campaign of manifest injustice killed Indians illegally. What or how might that fact, a supposed fact, right? How would that sit with you? What if I, someone who reminds you of an Indian, or maybe Indians because of my brown skin and my white hair, you might think I'm a shaman or a chief, that I have oral history oozing out of my pores, but do you take me at my word when I tell you the Indian wars were illegal? I can prove it. Look, I just wrote that about a month ago. I haven't looked at it again. When Jerry asked me to do this, I got really nervous and said, I got to read something. And in lieu of everything that's happening around us, I think it's important just to want to share with you, and maybe you thought the same thing I have, that, you know, the more research that I do into all the different sources of our history, that this violence is not new. This violence is not out of the ordinary. It's not, you know, a blip on the radar. It's part and parcel to how it all began. And so coming to really work with that with me, it's become beyond academic. Like, I thought I was gonna make a piece, I was gonna perform and have an audience, and now I'm like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. It's really been an incredibly wonderful education that I'm getting, that I'm learning all the time with my research and the people I talk to. And at the same time, I'm just wondering, what's the end, or what's going to happen? What's going to come with this information? Do people really listen? How's it going to change this power structures that we live in? And I don't know, something's got to change. I mean, we heard with COVID, if you didn't, who got hit the hardest? Black and brown bodies. Actually, no. Navajo Nation, all the First Nations people are the ones who suffered the most. And that's not to say who's worse off. I don't mean it that way. I hope you don't hear it that way. But I just know that many people, and I'm identify as a brown person, and, you know, my community got hit hard here in New York City, and it's not good. It's not good. But we continually confront, or at least I do, the sort of marginalization and the erasure. I mean, I really thank, I thank that we did the land acknowledgements, but those things are also really difficult for me. At the same time, I prefer to have them than not. But a lot of times I want to say, if we're going to do it, let's do it. Let's talk about the real land acknowledgement. And let's talk about why we don't see those people on these lands. And let's talk about the blood memory. So although I do really think it's important, and I really appreciate it that we started that way. So I'll just, oh man, I hope this was okay. I hope this is okay. I just think the history I'm learning about is resonating right now, okay? It resonates right now when I see young people get hit with batons, when George Floyd gets a knee to the neck. You know, all the people that, I mean, we all know that. And if you're older like me, and I see people here, this is really tough. You know, we've been here before, and we're going to be here again. But I do think as an artist and as an artist activist, it's also the times that we have to really reach out to people and just connect with people one-to-one and say, you know, we're in this together, and we need everybody's support. We need everybody's compassion. We need everybody's questions and struggles. It's all important. Every single person on this screen, you can make a difference. And I'm very humbled that I was invited to do this. I love being recognized as a Badger, and I'll just kindly say thank you very much. Thank you very much, and I'll pass it on back to you, Jerry, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you, George. That was wonderful. Thank you so much. Let's give it up for George.
I don't know what to do.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And so just to remind everybody, Elena is now going to give a talk, and then we'll have an open discussion afterwards. Cool. Thank you, George. Anna?
Well, quickly, I wanted to introduce Elena, who's actually a longtime friend of George's also. Elena, who is my partner, which we should acknowledge, but also a wonderful artist, choreographer, and dancer who has many accolades all over that I'm not going to name. But she has been investigating white supremacy and structures of inequality in her work for the last couple of years, particularly mentored in a program that George runs at the Hemispheric Institute. And yeah, she's going to continue that investigation of inequality through this medium. So I'll give it to Elena.
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to just talk for a little bit here, and then we're going to try something out. But I just wanted to say thank you, George. Yeah, George is a friend and mentor of mine, and I love him, and I'm obsessed with him. And yeah, it's George and I have connected, I think, because we're both really attached to history and to history as a lens through which to look at structural inequity and the ways that these violences and imbalances play out in the present. And one thing I've been thinking about a lot is how to, yes, look to the past, but one thing I feel I don't do enough of is look at the present, look at them I've gotten good at this kind of macro political way of addressing the world, what structures are at play, how can I identify what is feminist, what isn't, how can I kind of look at these big things. But I'm trying more and more to address these kinds of inequities in the smaller spaces I inhabit, the microstructures, how I am complicit in them. And so today I was really curious, we've all been thrust onto this platform of Zoom. And I basically, I just suddenly was using Zoom all the time. And I was like, wait, I don't know much about Zoom. I don't know what the politics of the company are. I don't know really even what the mechanism of the platform is, and how potentially Zoom is a space that could reperform some of these inequities that George was just naming that are embedded in our police system, embedded in most of our social fabric. So one way I'm thinking about that is to ask myself, what is this space? Right now we're all together and we're in a meeting, but we're also in a virtual room. And I asked Anna to name San Jose, California and the Tamayan people, because that's where the servers for Zoom are located. And so I'm thinking okay, how then, even though we're in this nebulous virtual room right now, it's also kind of tangible. We're all here together, and it's suddenly a space. And so I then started asking myself, what are the conditions shaping this space? How do I get here? And then I was really basically saying okay, I need a Wi-Fi connection. I need the resources to have Wi-Fi. I need a space to be able to, I need a computer. I need to be able to pay for a computer. I need a good enough download speed to be able to use the Zoom technology. I need enough space on my hard disk to download the app of Zoom. And if I can't download the Zoom app because maybe I don't have enough space on my hard disk, I can use their browser version, but their browser version has way fewer capabilities. So already I was like, whoa, already right there, there's an inequity built into the Zoom platform. So this is kind of my big question for today. Like, what is this virtual meeting space of Zoom, and what are its inner politics? And one thing George said, I'm just going to quote you, George. You said, you talked about how in this McIntosh versus Johnson case, essentially like the rights of the indigenous peoples living there were like taken away, and suddenly the colonizer owns the land. And I've been thinking a lot about this word host on Zoom, and how a host is someone who effectively owns the space, right? If I'm a host, I can invite you into my house. I'm hosting you. You come into my land. It's not yours, right? So Zoom is premised around the host. There cannot be a Zoom meeting without a host. Someone has to host the Zoom meeting. And in that sense, already, Zoom is premised around an inequity. I can control you, but you cannot control me. I felt this really strongly the other day when Anna and I were protesting. The police were in helicopters above us, and they flew down in the helicopter really low to kick up the dust around us, as if to say, we can touch you, but you can't touch us. And Zoom reperforms this. So okay, to back up, I'm also a performance maker and a choreographer. And so I'm thinking again, like, what is this space of Zoom? What is this meeting room? And suddenly I'm like, well, meeting rooms, where else do we meet? We meet in theaters. Zoom is a theater. And when I was thinking about this host inequity and how crazy it is that one person can control all the other people in the space, I was like, well, that's how I feel in performing arts institutions, right? A curator is the host. They invite me in to give a performance. And then they control what I can or cannot do. I can't light fire on a stage usually, right? I have to, as a kind of participant, if I'm the participant in the Zoom model, you guys can all see along the bottom of the Zoom screen, the participants list, if you have that functionality engaged. I'm a participant in a theater. So this host can kind of stop me if I'm doing something wrong. If I started to like post, there've been Zoom bombers posting anti-Semitic comments, like infiltrating private Zoom meetings. If I were to Zoom bomb right now, the host could turn off my video and stop me. So in that sense, it's a dramatic comparison, but I think it's worth acknowledging that I often feel as an artist that the theater has the power over me. And that also as audiences, I find that the director or the choreographer or the artist acts as a kind of proxy for the theater, so that the audience is essentially, doing what they're told. We listen to the ushers when we go into theaters, we're quiet, we follow the norms of the environment, and if we don't, we get kicked out, right? So already there's a kind of structure of policing and inequity embedded in the theater. So it sounds really shitty, right? It's like, oh my God, the host fucking sucks. George is giving me a thumbs up. He's liking my institutional critique. But I also think there's a positive way to look at host, right? And that's when we think about what's on our minds. Coronavirus, a virus. A virus goes and it occupies a host. Yes, coronavirus is horrible, but if we think about it metaphorically, a virus is disrupting the power of the host. It's eating at the host, right? So one thing I'm thinking about is, how can I be a virus in an institution? How can I be a virus trying to disrupt the norms of a place? So my proposal is that we explore this in the theater of Zoom. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go to a new Zoom meeting room, a new Zoom theater, and we're going to explore two sequential Zoom performances. And the goal is try to explore the extremes of the oppressive host structure, and then explore the extreme of the active, excited anti-institution virus. So
Zoom formance.
Yeah, George told me this is called a Zoom formance, and I vomited on that word, and I can't re-say it because it's disgusting. But I appreciate that interruption because Okay, so, but I want to make sure everyone's clear on what we're going to do. So first of all, I'm going to paste in the link to the new Zoom meeting. So I'm just going to do that right now. So don't do it yet. I'm pasting it into the chat. So soon I will leave this meeting and I will go to this new Zoom theater. The topic is a title for a performance in a theater owned by Zoom Video Communications Inc. So we're gonna go there, don't go there yet. And you're gonna have to leave this meeting. You're gonna click on that link and it's gonna say, do you wanna end this meeting and go to a new one? And you're gonna say yes, okay? And when you get there, you're gonna be stuck in the lobby. And that's what Zoom calls the waiting room, all right? But I'm calling it a lobby for today. And you guys are the audience and I'm the performer. And I've developed a little performance for you that you're gonna watch. And this whole first performance is gonna be about I'm the fucking host and I can do whatever the fuck I want to you. Because Zoom let me. Zoom created the tools for me to do that and you're gonna see that and I want you to see that, okay? And while you're watching this play out, I want you to take notes. Because after that, after about 5 minutes, we're gonna stop. We're gonna go back into the lobby and we're gonna start again. And in this new performance, we're gonna try to be as disruptive to the host structure as possible. So what does that mean? That might mean I make everyone a co-host. That might mean I pass off my hosting capability to another user. That might mean you turn off your video and say, fuck this. That might mean you use the closed captioning and like decide to like, you know, create a running commentary on what's going on. I have some proposals around what I want us to do. Sorry, not what I want us to do. I have some proposals to guide us into something because so we can have some structure. But basically that second performance section where we like restart, it might be a total shit show. And that's kind of the point. Like I want us to just like see what we can do with this impetus of like fucking with the Zoom structure of hosting. And one maybe like additional thing to keep in mind while we do that is that I hate how Zoom prioritizes individuality in that you literally can't hear like multiple people at the same time, right? It messes with the like audio levels. So that's going to be one of my proposals that I'm going to paste into the chat at the outset. But yeah, keep in mind, how can we embrace communality? How can we build a collective on Zoom? How can there be no host? What would it be to have no host? What if we're all the virus? How can we disrupt also Zoom's a bit like emphasis on surveillance? Like it's really easy to surveil each other right now. I can go like click on my mom and pin her video and make it huge and be like, Mom, I see the painting of flowers in the background of your image and I like can see like you got a bug bite on your arm. You know, like I can really kind of creep on people. What if we deny that possibility? Like what if we evade capture? What if we're this kind of virus, like coronavirus, that's like challenging to contain? Like that's what I'm excited to try in the second performance. So the first one is going to be much more passive. You'll chill out. You'll like watch me do some weird shit and we'll explore. And then I'm going to kick everyone back into the lobby and we'll do it again. So right now, if you'll please click that link and I'm going to go to the new Zoom room and I'll see you there. Okay. And Anna's going to stick around if you have any questions to help you get there. Okay.
Where is the link?
Go to the chat, and at the bottom of the chat, Elena posted.
Got it. Got it.
Do you see that link?
Mhm.
It's not live though. You can't click on it. You have to put it in your browser or something.
Mm,
It's not blue. It's not, you just can't click on it.
okay. Well, then I recommend copy and pasting it. I think in some computers it's different because mine is able to click, but I believe that yours might not work.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, Jerry's posting it again. Great. So we're all going to the new link.
I'll share something if no one else is going to share.
Yeah, please.
I think it's all the protesting and everything is great. I just have something that's bothering me. More women and children are killed every day. There's no marching for that. You know, I know this is just focusing on African Americans and men, and it's just on my nerves a little bit. I think it's totally warranted, but I just don't think everyone else should be forgotten. So, you know, I agree with your virus thing about how to be a virus. I teach my students how to do that very insidiously by the things I teach, the literature we read, and so on. But it seems sort of hopeless most of the time.
Can I say something to that?
Yes.
You know, I thank you for saying that, because my God, my mind is escaping. Elena knows who it is. Maybe Elena, you can remember, because I've been doing this 24-hour filibuster on gun violence for the last 3 years. And 2 years, Sydney Mosley does this really great piece about the police victims, Black women, and that how nobody knows the names. And it's so. I appreciate you bringing that up, and I think that's one of the problems when these things come up. That where does the attention go? Where does the focus go? But unfortunately, the real story is deeper and more nuanced than what we get. You know, so I appreciate you bringing that up.
I mean, there's a lot of videos of women being raped and murdered all over the internet.
Yep. Yeah, you're right.
I just came back, so I'm not sure if this was already asked. Jerry, did you already ask for people's first impressions? Yes?
Not in those words.
Okay.
So that's better language than I used.
Okay, sorry for the delay. I just wanted to ask, I just wanted to start us off by first of all, thanking everyone for these amazing versions of a talk. And then I just wanted to start with initial impressions or reactions to what you heard.
Well, I'll say something. This is maybe a little bit from the sublime to the ridiculous, but as regards inequality in Zoom, I mean, we're all doing a lot of things in Zoom these days. It's just a fact of our life. And the great inequality that I have found is, and maybe this is just the limitation of my experience, but it's age. And it makes me sad because I know people who are older who would benefit from being able to see their friends and see other people and have conversations with groups of people using a technology like Zoom, but they're terrified. And it's interesting, but very sad to see the visceral response that you get. It's just for some people, it's a terrifying idea. And I mean, I use Zoom a lot. I use it for things that aren't necessarily work. And I've seen a lot of people from, who are low income and people of color who have no trouble using Zoom if they're within a particular age range. If they're beyond that age range, they're not there. So, okay, just my 2 cents.
I just want to talk to George for a minute. I got to hold on. I have to move my gallery so I can see him. Hi, George.
Hi, I don't know who's talking.
My name's
there,
Jerry.
I see you, yeah.
Hi, I'm Jerry's mom. And I'm so fascinated with what you're learning. And Jerry actually taught me about the doctrine of separation before. We had a very long conversation about it some time ago. And it's really kind of scary because I went to law school and I never learned about it. And that is disgusting.
Yeah.
And I just want to tell you that what frightens me about it the most is that, not it, but that the law is used to frequently, I can't think of the word because I did get through that glass of wine. But well, it's used to continue our prejudices. And I'm going to give you an example. I live here on the North Shore of Long Island. And I'm a real estate attorney. When I see deeds going back not that far into the 30s and what have you, they say, and this property, you're prohibited to sell this property to Jews, blacks, Italians, various people of various ethnicities. And it wasn't that long ago that the Supreme Court of the United States said, you can't do that. But they still appear in the deeds now. I mean, they're unconstitutional, so it doesn't matter that it's in the deed. But they were legalized, they were lawful. And that's in the 20th century, they were lawful. So you have the Constitution, the United States laws, giving authenticity. I can't think of the right words, as I said, giving, sanctioning, that's the word, sanctioning these things, just like McIntosh sanctioned the taking of these lands by the Native Americans years ago from the inception of our country. And I think that what you're doing and the path you're going is fantastic. And one day I would really love to meet you and talk about this further. Where do you live? Oh, you're in Brooklyn, right? Well, you're muted right now.
I'm at 177 Adelphi in Fort Greene. You can come over anytime.
Well, we have to wait till this pandemic.
I know.
Because I'm high risk too. But
if I can just say one thing, the thing that's most disturbing is that I am a total believer in law, and I love the judicial branch, and I love studying this stuff. What's really unbelievably disillusioning is to see how the judicial branch was part of the colonizing arm. And not only was it began the colonization by legally saying something like, we are discovering sovereign, we own the land. And it's mind-boggling, but there's case after case after case. So just to close out, when I said it's a binding law, it's something that it's called legal precedent, stare decisis. And so they refer to this case time and time again, even though the guy who wrote it, John Marshall, 9 years later in Worcester versus Georgia, said, no, that doesn't work. It's wrong. I made a mistake. He doesn't say I made a mistake, but he said that law was wrong. And then the Jackson court, he just overshot that and just kept going back to McIntosh and Johnson. But McIntosh Johnson has really, really dealt such a heavy blow to Native Americans, to Indian country in this country. And people just don't know that. And I certainly didn't know it till a few years ago. But it's devastating when you're like, oh my God, this shit is really real.
And the sad thing about it is that it's still being implemented.
Yeah, totally.
The difference being that, well, not that much, but the same kind of rules were used to maintain the patriarchy.
Yeah.
And like, for instance, cases going like Blackwell were saying to maintain the patriarchy with women, to say, well, we're going to protect women. You can't work late at night because we have to protect you. You shouldn't be working in the bars and being around these evil men. We're not going to let you work late at night, so you can't work late at night. And we're not going to let you do certain things because we're protecting you, because you're women and you're gentle and fragile. So we need to protect you. And the Supreme Court made these laws that wouldn't let women do things and have jobs that were equal to men because they were protecting them under the guise of protecting them. And they institutionalized sexism. So those laws slowly changed, but in the same way, but the difference here being that with the Native Americans, they haven't changed.
No, not really.
Because the Native Americans don't really have the vote. We keep them isolated. We keep them poor. We keep them.
They don't have running water.
They don't have electricity. They don't have running water. Whatever. I'll shut up. I'm sorry. As Jerry knows, I talk too much.
No, you.
So I'm going to mute myself.
Oh shit. Sorry. I was definitely surprised to learn that Indian was actually a preferred term because I feel like I get bombarded with a lot of information, especially on social media, about like what terms to be using, what language to use. So that was like very enlightening, and yeah, thank you in general.
Read Tommy Orange's novel. It came out last year called There. Tommy Orange is a Native American writer. It's a great, great novel. And he talks about urban Indians. He talks about Indians who are not on the reservation. They live in cities and how they're lost. and that, you know, and he makes this pun about if you say Native American, you know that they're either a professor or a student in college. You know, he makes a joke about it. You know, it's not that they, and I work very closely with these Native American legal scholars on my piece. It's not that they disavow Native. It's not that. It's just that they really go by Indian first and they have no issue with it. And what they say is the history's there. The U.S. has a federal Indian policy, and we go by that. So that's why it was a wake up for me too. I was like, I kept saying Native American, like, George, relax, we're Indians.
I would also add that I feel like people who are coming to these histories newly, I read the Indigenous Peoples History of the United States, and that's a really good like introduction to this like understanding of this genocide and of the ways it affects contemporary Indian life.
Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz.
George.
Yeah.
I'm Lizzie Fox's father.
Congratulations.
And Charles. I'm very interested in the Mesoamerican traditions.
Yeah.
And in that context, I've had, of course, encounters with the struggles that took place in the 16th century, the 16th century, around the law of the Indies, which recognized the basic humanity of the Native Americans.
Right.
And I'm wondering if that law perhaps gave legal powers to the Native Americans that in fact the English version of law, which was based on Calvin and Puritanism, deprived them of that. I think that would be a very intriguing exploration given the fact that Protestants, of which I am one, have tended to celebrate their understanding of law as an enlightened entree into modernity, and have never taken any great interest in the law of the Indies and the struggles de las Casas and his concerns that were expressed in the 16th century. So I just raised that as a question of whether this has ever been part of your exploration and reflection.
Well, I don't know where everybody is on this. I'm going to be really brief. First of all, that's really cool. So there's a real distinction between Spanish colonialism and English colonialism.
Oh,
and
for
so,
sure.
And the difference is the Spanish were much worse. And the ironic thing is that the British Empire, the British royalty, were actually the ones that were looking out more for the Indian cultures against the colonists. And if you read the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson calls out King George for protecting the Indians and inciting the Indians to fight against the colonists, when in fact, it was the British royalty, and if this was a wake up for me, that was actually saying Indian country is Indian country. And they said the colonists can't go and buy land from them, you gotta go through us, because they wanted to monitor that. So what I've learned, which is really interesting, is that the British royalty were not they were colonizers, yes, and I'm not gonna say they were okay, but they weren't as savage as the Spanish were. The Spanish basically would land, read a document from the Papal Church saying, we have the right of God to take over. They would read it in Spanish. The Indians couldn't understand them and basically said the same thing. We're now the owners of you and we're going to take over. They were probably even more horrific than the British, you know. But the thing that you said about the law of Indies, I think that's really intriguing. And I just found out about it and I definitely would love to dive into that more. But that's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Elena's turn, because I love what Elena did. I don't know, she's so crazy. We got to talk about Elena's piece. I loved it.
Not a piece. I guess I think
it's a piece now.
Not a piece, but a thing. I guess part of my desire to do that, maybe for those who don't see like experimental performance as often as I do, is to prompt us to consider the ways that we reperform these dynamics in our daily lives, like on Zoom and in our interactions, and like how, I think like I've been doing a lot of self-work around what it means to decolonize. I've done all my genealogy and discovered my early ancestors coming from Great Britain and literally like owning land in the early colonization of the US, owning slaves. And like somehow for me, all of that relates to then how do I act in like on Zoom? Like how do I take up space in any context? So that's why I did that, because I don't even like Zoom, like fuck Zoom, ew. But we're here. So I'm like thinking about how do we use this? Like how does it, and I just was so struck that Zoom, I think, is built on a kind of, it has colonization embedded in it. Corporate structures have colonization embedded in them. So
It does.
like it actually all relates for those of us, I think. Yeah, for me, this like linkage to history is super relevant, but also I want to ask like, yeah, what about right now? So
I love, and I said contribution, not piece. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But I love the way you did it. So it really mirrors a colonial structure. You're right. I never thought.
Well, and there's this struggle, I think, where like, do we need to, I think it's valuable to point out colonial structures that continue to exist.
That's right.
But then how do you not participate in them? Like, how do you disrupt them is, I think, the really harder thing to do. And that's where I hope we go. I don't know.
Yeah. Thank you, because I always thought of Zoom as like putting people together, and the opposite of what you showed me. So it's nice to see the other side of it.
Well, I think I also only came to that realization by the other night. I was part of I worked the technical side of Zoom for a big group conversation on a town hall led by the dance union, which is led by 2 Black dance artists. And it was on dismantling white supremacy in dance institutions. And I ran the Zoom, and because they didn't have enough, they decided to do it in a certain way where like freaking 400 participants came, and I had to make them all turn off their video. And I had to turn off like 300 people's video. And I was like, and I was a co-host. And I was like, this is oppressive. I am turning off the video and muting like 200 people of color right now. Like it was very bizarre. And it was definitely in service of the event, and it was fine. But suddenly I was like, I didn't realize Zoom had this power. Like I didn't know that Zoom could actually, that as a host, I could like silence people. And it was pretty disturbing. And then I started to ask like, why didn't I know that? And like, what does that reveal about what Zoom was meant for? You know, like, I think we're using it to come together, which is amazing. That's magical. But there's something more insidious underneath that I'm trying to tease out and like work through and make sure I'm aware of when I use it.
This is a really half-baked thought, but I think baked into that is just the people who invented these applications. A lot of them are like white 25-year-olds, right? And they probably haven't considered or haven't had even the time in life to consider what structures have informed them. And so they're just on automatic generation of that and then copying it and putting it forward. So I think it's a really valid attempt to start to criticize that and understand it, because the next generation of whatever comes next will have to adapt for our changing society, or hopefully changing.
Yeah, I actually researched a lot. I was going to give a more traditional lecture and then I threw that away. But had I would have mentioned that I researched a lot into like video telephony and this history. And it started with Alexander Bell and like the telephone technology. And then in the 1930s, the Third Reich took it up as a show of like technological prowess and had some of the first effective video conferencing technology, like audio video two-way technology. And then that kind of got kiboshed by World War II because they had to divert resources from that video technology. And then in like the 60s, big technology companies started to be like, oh, this is maybe feasible for meetings, for corporate structures. And in the 70s and 80s, it was also then pushed forward by advocates for deaf people, which are still used, like video relay services are used by deaf people to, like a hearing person will say something into a phone, it'll be relayed to a translator who has a video screen and like will sign that to the deaf person. But then it was really co-opted by corporate structures. So there's something also like, I was really fascinated by this history of like, it felt like a show of technological prowess, definitely something that was like, you know, responding to a need for differently abled people. And then also really for like earnings calls for publicly owned companies. Like every quarter they have to do earnings calls, and they were doing those on telephone. And then with video technology, it was like you get an inside look into our company, and somehow that makes us more desirable, more stock, like more people willing to invest stock. So there's just something interesting how like these, yeah, I think like neoliberal capitalism basically like birthed video conferencing, and it's pretty obvious when you look at its internal structures.
My question is, how much of this Zoom stuff can be accessed by Zoom or their partners? This is the question, and use it as a form of discussion, surveillance, and stuff like that. We really don't know what Zoom is actually recording, observing, who they're working with too. I mean, the way the government is now. We could be being observed right this second, or they could, certain things could be misconstrued, and we could be on the line.
It's true. I would just add, like, I'm doing a master's degree in Germany right now, and none of my German friends will use Zoom because they're much more data conscious in Germany, and they won't, it's too insecure. They don't use Zoom. Like, we've had to move everything to Skype or WebEx because they're more secure platforms, because everyone's afraid of getting hacked.
Okay, yes. WebEx is, as I gather, I've never used it, is a more complicated platform than Zoom. It's not as user-friendly, let's put it that way. But yes, this is very interesting.
Wow, guys, thank you so much. I want to invite, if anyone had any last thoughts before we wrap up. We want to be conscious of everyone's time. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for participating and engaging in all these incredible talks. Thank you, George and Elena. Our next talk flock will be on the 24th, so stay tuned. We don't know who's going to be talking yet, but interesting people, we can promise that. Jerry, is there anything you want to say to close out?
No, thank you. Stay safe, stay engaged, and we hope to see you soon.
And thank you. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, thank you all.
Yes, thank you. Yes. Good luck as we stay with the fight.
Yes.
Bye. Bye, Jerry. You're muted.
Jerry,
Bye.
you're muted.
Thanks for coming.
Bye, Lizzie Flox.
Hi, Perry. Now it's just Jerry's family. This is